Welcome to another exciting episode of the English Pod community. I'm your host, Natasha, and today we're diving into some real-life stories and practical examples that will help you improve your English listening and writing skills. As you listen to these stories, you'll notice how the language we use in everyday situations can make a big difference in your communication. So, if you're new here, welcome. Every week, we upload episodes like this to help you improve your English. So make sure to hit the like button if you enjoy the episode. Let me ask you a few questions first. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you didn't know what to say because the conversation was moving too fast? Or maybe you've been in a meeting or a gathering where everyone seems to understand each other, but you feel left out? Today, we're going to work on understanding these situations better and getting you ready to communicate with confidence. Let's start with a story from my friend Sarah. Sarah is a marketing manager at a tech company, and she often travels for work. Last year, she went on a business trip to London. One day, Sarah was at a conference, and she met a group of professionals. They were talking about their new projects, and Sarah was struggling to understand everything because of the fast pace of the conversation. She knew a lot of the words, but it was difficult to follow along with the flow of ideas. After the conference, Sarah realized that she needed to practice listening to conversations that were more natural and fast-paced. So, she started listening to podcasts just like this one and reading business articles in English. By doing this regularly, she started to improve her ability to catch important information in a conversation. In fact, a few months later, she was able to lead her own meetings in English with more confidence. Now, think about a time when I were in a similar situation. Maybe you were in a conversation with colleagues or a group of friends, and the conversation was moving so quickly that you didn't know how to jump in. This happens to all of us, and it's a normal part of learning. But don't worry. Just like Sarah, you can practice and improve. Let's talk about another example from my friend David. David works as a software developer, and his job requires him to explain complex topics to his team. One day, he had to explain a new software feature to his colleagues during a meeting. David said that at first he felt nervous because he wasn't sure how to explain it clearly in English. He was afraid that his colleagues wouldn't understand him. So David decided to prepare ahead of time. He practiced describing the feature in simple terms, focusing on the key points. During the meeting, David was able to explain everything clearly. His colleagues asked questions, and he was able to answer them confidently because he had prepared well. After that meeting, David felt much more confident speaking in English at work. Do you ever feel nervous before speaking in English? It's normal, but with practice, you can build the confidence you need to speak clearly and be understood. I remember when I first started learning English. There were so many times when I felt unsure about my pronunciation or grammar. But the more I practiced, the more natural it became. I started by listening to podcasts and watching videos in English, just like the one you're listening to right now. Gradually, I began to notice improvements in my own speech and listening skills. It's all about consistency. If you practice listening to English every day, you will start to hear the patterns in the language. For example, in business meetings, you will get used to phrases like, "Could you clarify that?" Or, "Let me give you an example." These phrases might sound difficult at first, but once you hear them often enough, they'll start to feel familiar. Have you ever noticed how, when you listen to native speakers, they often use these small phrases to keep the conversation flowing? Understanding these phrases is an important step toward improving your listening skills and making your own speech sound more natural. Now let me share one more story, this time from my own experience. A few years ago, I was in a situation where I had to give a presentation in front of an audience. It was an international conference, and the audience was made up of people from different countries. I was nervous because I was worried about my accent, and whether people would understand me. But I realized that the most important thing was to speak clearly and confidently. I focused on the key points of my presentation and made sure I used simple language that everyone could understand. It worked. The audience responded positively, and I felt a huge sense of achievement. So, what can you take away from these stories? The key is practice. Whether you're listening to conversations, watching videos, or reading articles in English, the more you expose yourself to the language, the better you'll get at understanding it and using it yourself. Let's continue with a story from my friend Mark. Mark is a teacher, and he often has to give lessons to students who speak different languages. One day he had a group of students from various countries, and they were all at different levels of English. Some students understood everything right away, while others needed more help. Mark realized that he needed to adjust the way he explained things. He started using simpler words and gave examples that were easy to understand. For instance, when explaining how to write an email, he used a step-by-step approach. He showed them how to start with a greeting, how to explain the purpose of the email, and how to finish it politely. Mark also encouraged the students to ask questions whenever they were unsure. This experience taught Mark a valuable lesson. When you are speaking English, it's important to be patient and clear, especially if you are talking to someone who is still learning. If you can slow down and use simple language, you will help others understand you better. This is something you can also try in your own conversations. If you're talking to someone in English and they don't understand something, right away, don't worry. Just take a moment to explain it again in a simpler way. It's a great way to help them, and it also helps you practice speaking clearly. Now let me share an example from my own teaching experience. A few years ago, I had a student named Tom. Tom was really motivated to learn English, but he was often shy to speak in front of others. He felt nervous that he might make a mistake, so he kept his answers short and avoided speaking too much. To help Tom feel more confident, I gave him some simple strategies. I encouraged him to practice speaking with me first before speaking to other people. I also suggested that he use simple phrases like, "Can you repeat that?" or "I don't understand" when he was in a conversation. These phrases helped Tom ask for clarification without feeling embarrassed. Over time, Tom became more comfortable with speaking in English. He started using these phrases naturally in conversations, and his confidence grew. Eventually, he was able to speak more freely without worrying about making mistakes. Have you ever felt nervous about speaking English? Maybe you're afraid of making mistakes or sounding different. This is something many learners face, but the key is to keep practicing and not be afraid to make mistakes. Mistakes are a normal part of learning, and they help you improve. Think about it. Every time you make a mistake, you're actually learning something new. And the more you practice, the fewer mistakes you'll make in the future. It's like building muscle. At first it's hard, but with regular practice, you'll get stronger. One way to practice speaking is by having short conversations in English every day. You don't have to talk for hours. Just a few minutes each day can make a big difference. You could talk about your day, describe something you see, or ask a simple question. The goal is to get comfortable with using English in everyday situations. Remember when I first started practicing speaking English? At first I was too shy to speak, but then I realized that the only way to improve was to practice regularly. So I started by having short conversations with my friends, even if it was just about the weather or what I had for lunch. Little by little, I became more comfortable, and my speaking skills improved. So, what can you do today to practice your speaking? Maybe you can try talking to a friend or even practicing in front of a mirror. It might feel a little awkward at first, but trust me, it's one of the best ways to improve. Now let's switch gears a little. We've talked a lot about speaking, but listening is just as important. One of the best ways to improve your listening Skills is to listen to real-life conversations, just like the ones we're having in this episode. When you hear people speak in natural settings, you can pick up on useful phrases and learn how to understand different accents and speaking speeds. Let's take another example from my friend Jane. Jane works in customer service, and her job involves speaking with clients on the phone every day. At first, Jane found it difficult to understand some of her clients because they spoke quickly or with different accents. She didn't want to keep asking them to repeat themselves, so she decided to improve her listening skills. Jane started by listening to audio recordings of conversations in English. She would play them a few times, trying to catch as much as she could. If she didn't understand something, she would rewind and listen again. Over time, Jane noticed that her listening skills improved, and she was able to understand her clients better without needing to ask them to repeat themselves. This is something you can do too. When you listen to English conversations, whether it's through podcasts or audio recordings, try to listen carefully. Don't be afraid to rewind if you don't catch something. The more you practice, the easier it will become to understand different speakers. And just like speaking, the more you practice listening, the better you'll get. You'll start to notice patterns in the language, and soon enough, you'll find yourself understanding conversations much more easily. Let's talk about another technique to improve your listening. Have you ever tried shadowing? Shadowing is when you listen to a conversation and try to repeat what the speakers are saying, just as they say it. This technique helps improve both your listening and speaking skills. By repeating what you hear, you can get used to the rhythm of the language and learn how to pronounce words correctly. You can start by listening to a short conversation, pausing after each sentence and repeating it out loud. Don't worry if you can't repeat everything perfectly at first. The goal is to get better with each try. This technique worked really well for my friend Michael. Michael was trying to improve his English for his job interviews. He found that shadowing helped him improve his listening and speaking skills, and it also made him more confident when answering questions. If you want to give shadowing a try, pick an audio clip that's around 1 to 2 minutes long. Listen to it a few times, then try to repeat it as accurately as you can. Do this regularly, and you'll notice a big improvement in your listening and speaking abilities. Let's dive deeper into improving your English listening and speaking skills, shall we? Now that we've talked about a few real-life stories and examples, I want to focus on how you can use different strategies to understand and speak English with more confidence. First, let's think about something we all experience: meeting new people. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you're meeting someone for the first time and they're speaking in English? Maybe you don't know the person very well, and their accent or speed of speaking is making it hard to understand. That happens all the time. I remember when I first moved to a new city for work, and I had to meet a lot of new people. At first, I struggled to understand my colleagues, especially in meetings. Some of them spoke quickly, and others used words I wasn't familiar with. It was a little overwhelming, but after a while I realized that the key was to break things down into smaller parts. Instead of trying to catch everything at once, I started focusing on key words, the overall idea, and the main points. For example, if someone was explaining a project, I wouldn't try to catch every single word. Instead, I would listen for the most important information, like the project's deadline, who was responsible for what, and what the next steps were. Once I got those key points, I could usually understand the rest of the conversation. Over time, I became better at catching more details and following the conversation without feeling lost. You can try this technique too. In a meeting, a conversation, or even when watching a video in English, try not to stress about understanding everything. Instead, listen for the main points and try to pick up key words. If you don't understand something, Don't be afraid to ask for clarification. Phrases like, "Could you explain that again?" or "What do you mean by that?" are perfect for this situation. It's all part of learning. Another great strategy to improve your listening skills is to practice listening to different accents. In English, there are many accents, and understanding them can be a challenge. But guess what? The more you listen to different accents, the easier it will be for you to understand them. A friend of mine, John, works in a customer service department. His job involves speaking with clients from all around the world. In the beginning, John found it difficult to understand clients from different countries because of their accents. For instance, clients from Australia or Ireland speak English in ways that are different from what he was used to. At first, John thought he would never be able to understand them fully, but he was determined to improve. So, what did John do? He started listening to podcasts and watching YouTube videos from people with various accents. He even listened to TED Talks from speakers with different accents. By exposing himself to different ways of speaking, John improved his listening skills significantly. He also got better at picking up words and phrases that were commonly used by people from different regions. You can do the same. If you have a favorite YouTube channel, podcast, or movie, try watching it in English with subtitles on. After some time, you'll start recognizing words and sounds you might have missed before. It's like training your ear to understand the nuances of English speech. In addition to improving your listening skills, let's also talk about how you can boost your speaking skills. Have you ever wanted to speak English more confidently in front of others? Maybe in a meeting, at work, or during a social event? Speaking in English can be intimidating, especially when you're still learning the language. But there are ways you can make it easier. One powerful way to practice speaking is by recording yourself. I know it might feel a bit awkward at first, but trust me, it's incredibly helpful. When you listen to your recordings, you'll notice things you can improve on, like pronunciation or sentence structure. You might even realize that you're more fluent than you thought. Let's take my friend Rachel as an example. Rachel works as a lawyer, and she often has to speak English in front of clients and colleagues. She used to feel nervous about her pronunciation and wasn't sure if she was sounding natural. So Rachel decided to start recording herself. She would listen to her favorite English news channels and repeat what they said, trying to mimic their pronunciation and tone. Then she would record herself saying the same thing. Over time, she noticed that her confidence grew because she could hear her progress. By doing this regularly, Rachel not only improved her speaking but also became more comfortable with the language. She no longer felt nervous when she had to speak in meetings or talk to clients. In fact, Rachel said that recording herself helped her speak more clearly and at a faster pace. I highly recommend this technique. If you're trying to improve your speaking, try recording yourself reading a short article, or even talking about your day in English. You can listen back to it, and you'll notice areas where you can improve. Plus, it'll help you get used to speaking at a natural pace, which is important for sounding fluent. Another great way to practice speaking is by having conversations with people who are also learning English. There are online communities and language exchange platforms where you can connect with other learners. By practicing with someone who understands what you're going through, you'll feel more comfortable making mistakes and learning from them. Let me tell you about my friend Lucas. Lucas lives in Brazil, and he wanted to improve his English for his job. He joined an online language exchange group where he could practice speaking with other learners. At first, he felt nervous about making mistakes, but the other learners were supportive, and they helped each other out. Over time, Lucas became more confident and started using English in his everyday life. He even made new friends through the language exchange group. If you're looking for opportunities to practice speaking, try finding a language partner or joining an online community. Speaking regularly with someone else is one of the best ways to improve. It doesn't matter if you make mistakes. What's important is that you're practicing and getting better each time. Let's also talk about how writing can support your listening and speaking skills. Writing might seem like a separate skill, but it's actually a great way to reinforce what you're learning in listening and speaking. When you write, you give yourself a chance to organize your thoughts and practice using new vocabulary and grammar structures. For example, after listening to a podcast or watching a video in English, you could write a summary of what you learned. This helps you remember important information and improves your writing skills at the same time. You can also try writing short essays or journal entries in English. The more you write, the more you'll practice using the language in different ways. I have a friend, Emily, who used writing to improve her English. Emily moved to the United States for her studies, and she had to write essays regularly for her classes. In the beginning, she struggled with organizing her thoughts and using the correct vocabulary. But Emily practiced every day. After listening to English podcasts or watching videos, she would write about what she learned. Over time, she became better at writing essays and felt more confident speaking as well. Her writing helped her improve her listening and speaking because it gave her a deeper understanding of the language. If you want to try this, you can start small by writing a few sentences about your day in English. Then, challenge yourself by writing longer pieces, like stories or summaries of things you've read or listened to. Writing every day will help you strengthen your language skills overall. Now let's dive even deeper into the strategies you can use to improve your English skills. This time, I want to take things a step further and talk about how you can incorporate English into your daily routine to really see progress. Learning a language is all about practice, and the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. One way to make English a part of your daily life is by setting small, achievable goals for yourself. For example, if you're working on listening skills, set a goal to listen to at least 10 minutes of English content every day. This could be a podcast, an audiobook, or even just a short video. The key here is consistency. When I first started improving my English listening skills, I made it a habit to listen to English for just 10 minutes each morning while getting ready. I started with podcasts that were easy to understand and then slowly moved on to more challenging content as my skills improved. Over time, I noticed that I could understand more and more. Once you're comfortable with your listening practice, it's time to integrate English into other parts of your day. For example, you can change the language settings on your phone or computer to English. At first, it might seem a bit challenging, especially if you're used to your phone being in your native language. But it's a great way to immerse yourself in the language. You'll start seeing new vocabulary and phrases that you can incorporate into your daily conversations. Let's think about another situation we all face: going to the grocery store. This is something that happens every week, right? Why not use that opportunity to practice English? The next time you go shopping, try to think of the names of items in English. For example, when you're in the produce section, think about the English names of fruits and vegetables. You can even challenge yourself by saying out loud the English words for things as you walk around. Not only will this help you learn new vocabulary, but it'll also give you practice with pronunciation. The more you speak in English, the more natural it will feel. If you have a partner, friend, or family member who is also learning English, you can take turns practicing English together. For example, try setting up a 10-minute conversation each day where you only speak in English. You can talk about anything, your day, what you're planning to do, or just your thoughts. Speaking regularly, even if it's just for a short time, helps you improve both fluency and confidence. I remember when my friend Sarah started learning English, she was shy to speak at first. But after a few weeks of daily conversations with her language partner, she became so much more confident. The key is to keep practicing. even if you make mistakes. The more you speak, the easier it gets. Another great way to practice speaking English is by talking to yourself. Now, I know this might sound a little strange, but trust me, it works. Speaking out loud to yourself helps you practice forming sentences and improves your pronunciation. I used to do this all the time when I was learning. I would look in the mirror and talk about my day in English, describing what I was doing, where I was going, or what I was thinking. You can even narrate your actions in English as you go about your day. For example, while cooking, you could say, "I'm chopping the onions now," or "I need to add salt to the soup." This might feel a little silly at first, but it's a great way to practice speaking and get used to thinking in English. Speaking of thinking in English, let's dive into how you can make that a natural part of your language learning journey. One of the biggest challenges learners face is that they often translate everything from their native language into English. This slows down their thinking and makes speaking less fluid. The goal is to start thinking directly in English without translating. This takes time, but the more you practice, the easier it gets. Here's a strategy that helped me. I started by thinking about simple things in English, like what I wanted for breakfast or what I planned to do that day. I would tell myself, "I'm going to have eggs and toast for breakfast," or "after work, I'll go to the gym." Gradually, I started thinking about more complex things in English. For example, when I was planning my weekend, I would think, "What should I do this Saturday? Maybe I'll go for a walk in the park." The goal is to make English your default language when you're thinking about everyday situations. At first, it may feel difficult, and you might find yourself translating a lot. But the more you practice thinking in English, the more natural it becomes. Soon enough, you'll find that your English is getting smoother and faster because you're thinking directly in the language. Now let's switch gears and talk about reading. Reading is one of the best ways to improve your vocabulary and comprehension skills. The great thing about reading is that you can go at your own pace, and you can focus on understanding the meaning of new words. If you're just starting, it's a good idea to read books or articles that are at your level. You don't have to dive into complex novels right away. Instead, try reading stories or articles that are designed for English learners. These materials often include helpful vocabulary lists and are written in simple language, making it easier for you to follow along. A great way to improve your reading skills is by choosing materials that interest you. For example, if you enjoy cooking, you could read English recipes. If you like sports, try reading articles or blogs about your favorite team. Reading things you enjoy will keep you motivated to continue learning, and it will help you remember new words and phrases. I used to read a lot of articles on my phone during my lunch breaks, and this helped me expand my vocabulary while also improving my reading speed. The key is to read every day, even if it's just for 10-15 minutes. Over time, you'll find that you understand more and more without having to look up every word. Another great practice is to keep a vocabulary notebook. As you read or listen to new English content, jot down words or phrases that are new to you. Later, look up their meanings and try to use them in your own sentences. This not only helps you remember new vocabulary, but also teaches you how to use it in context. Writing is another powerful tool in your language learning toolkit. If you want to improve your English, you should try to write regularly. Writing helps you practice using new words and grammar structures in a meaningful way. You can start by keeping a daily journal. Each day, write a few sentences about what you did, how you felt, or what you learned. At first, it might feel a little difficult, but the more you write, the easier it will get. Writing also forces you to think about how to express your ideas clearly, which is an important skill in both speaking and writing. Let's say you're writing about your day. You could write something like, "Today I woke up early and went for a walk in the park. The weather was beautiful. so I enjoyed the fresh air. After my walk, I made some breakfast and worked for a few hours. In the evening, I met up with my friend Sarah and we went to the movies. By writing regularly, you'll get more comfortable with sentence structures, vocabulary, and even grammar. As you continue practicing, remember that mistakes are a natural part of the learning process. Don't be afraid to make them. Every mistake you make is an opportunity to learn and improve. I used to worry a lot about making mistakes when speaking English, but over time I realized that making mistakes is how we learn. The important thing is to keep going, practice every day, and keep improving. Let's talk about another fun way to practice: watching English videos and repeating what you hear. This technique is often called shadowing. When you watch a video or listen to a podcast, try to repeat the words as you hear them. This helps with pronunciation, fluency, and listening comprehension. If you're watching a YouTube video, pause it every few seconds and repeat what the person said. Pay attention to how they say things, their intonation, and the rhythm of their speech. The more you practice this, the more natural your speaking and listening will become. Let's continue exploring some more practical and fun ways to practice your English skills. By now, you may be realizing that learning a language is more than just memorizing vocabulary and grammar rules. It's about living the language, making it a part of your everyday life, and finding ways to immerse yourself in it. Today, I'll walk you through even more techniques that can help you reach your English learning goals, all while keeping things fun and engaging. One very effective strategy is to practice using English in real-world situations. It's one thing to learn the language in a classroom or from a book, but it's another thing entirely to use it in real life. Let's say you're going to a cafe. Instead of just thinking in your native language, try to think about what you would say in English if you were there. You might ask for your coffee in English or talk to the barista about the weather or your plans for the day. The more you practice these real-life situations, the more confident and natural your English will become. For example, last week I went to a local cafe with my friend Mark, who's also learning English. We decided that we would only speak in English during the entire visit. I ordered my coffee and asked the barista about the specials in English. Mark also spoke in English, and we even chatted about the weather in English while waiting for our drinks. It felt a little challenging at first, but the more we spoke, the easier it became. It's important to push yourself in these real situations because it helps you practice not only vocabulary and grammar, but also cultural aspects of language, like tone and body language. Next, let's talk about something that can really help: your listening skills, podcasts, and audiobooks. Listening to native speakers talk about everyday topics is one of the best ways to improve your listening comprehension. The good news is there are so many podcasts and audiobooks available for English learners, so you can find something that interests you. I recommend starting with podcasts that are designed for learners, like the English Pod Community or others, that focus on simple, clear English. These shows often explain vocabulary and expressions, which makes it easier for you to follow along. One thing I like to do is listen to a podcast episode on my way to work or school. I might listen to a 15-20-minute episode about a topic that interests me, and then later I'll take a few minutes to reflect on what I learned. If I didn't understand a word or phrase, I'll look it up and practice using it in a sentence. You'd be surprised how much your listening comprehension improves when you make it a regular habit. And even if you don't catch every word, the more you listen, the more you'll start picking up on the rhythm and flow of natural speech. Speaking of podcasts, let's consider how you can improve your speaking skills through imitation. This is where the technique called shadowing comes into play. Shadowing is when you listen to a piece of audio and then try to repeat it as closely as possible, matching the speaker's tone, rhythm, and pronunciation. At first, it might be hard to keep up, but over time, you'll improve your fluency and pronunciation. It's like playing a game where you try to copy the speaker as closely as possible. You can even choose podcasts or YouTube videos where the speaker talks about daily activities, like cooking, shopping, or traveling, so that the content is relevant and useful for your own life. Another fun and effective way to practice speaking is by recording yourself. When you listen to your own voice, it gives you the chance to hear how you sound in English and figure out areas where you can improve. It's normal to feel a bit nervous when you first record yourself, but this is a powerful tool for learning. You can record yourself reading a short passage, or even just talking about your day in English. After listening to the recording, pay attention to your pronunciation and fluency. You can even compare your recording to a native speaker's version of the same text to see how close you are. Over time, you'll notice improvements in your pronunciation and confidence. The beauty of recording yourself is that it's easy to do anywhere. You don't need a fancy microphone or studio equipment. Just your phone will work perfectly. You could even create short vlogs in English, where you talk about things that happen during your day. For example, you might record a video in the morning while making your coffee, or in the evening when you're reflecting on your day. Not only will this help with speaking, but it will also give you practice organizing your thoughts in English. Now, let's shift gears and talk about writing. Writing is often overlooked in language learning, but it's one of the best ways to reinforce new vocabulary and grammar. If you're unsure where to start, try writing short paragraphs about simple topics. For example, you could write about your favorite hobbies, your family, or a memorable event in your life. The key is to make writing a regular habit. Even just 10 minutes a day of writing can lead to huge improvements over time. One thing that helped me when I was learning was keeping a daily journal in English. I would write about what I did each day, how I felt, and any new things I learned. Sometimes I would even try to describe my surroundings in detail, like what the weather was like or what I saw during my walk to the store. By writing every day, I practiced using new vocabulary and grammar structures. It also helped me reflect on how much I was improving. If I made a mistake, I'd look it up and make sure to use the correct word or sentence structure next time. For those of you who want to improve your writing even further, there's another technique called dictation. You can listen to an audio or video in English, pause it after each sentence, and write down exactly what you heard. This exercise is great for improving your listening comprehension, spelling, and writing accuracy. Afterward, check your writing against the original transcript to see how well you did. Over time, dictation will help you listen more carefully, and it will train your brain to recognize English words and sentence structures more quickly. Now let's focus on vocabulary building. A solid vocabulary is essential for becoming fluent in English. The more words you know, the more confidently you can speak and write. One technique I used to expand my vocabulary was learning new words in context. For example, instead of just memorizing random words from a list, I would learn words in sentences or phrases. This helped me understand how the word was used in real conversations. One way to build vocabulary is through reading. Every time I read a new article, book, or blog post, I make a note of any new words I come across. Later, I look up the meaning of these words and try to use them in my own writing or speaking. You can also use flashcards to help remember new words. There are plenty of apps that let you create digital flashcards, which makes it easy to practice vocabulary wherever you go. In addition to reading, another fun way to practice vocabulary is through games. There are lots of word games available, such as crossword puzzles, word searches, or apps like Quizlet, where you can create your own flashcard sets and practice anytime. Games are a great way to make learning feel less like a chore and more like a fun challenge. When it comes to speaking fluently, one of the most important things to remember is that fluency is not about speaking fast. It's about speaking clearly. and confidently. One strategy that worked for me was practicing speaking slowly at first, focusing on pronunciation and clarity. Over time, as I got more comfortable, I was able to speak more quickly without sacrificing clarity. All right, let's dive even deeper into how you can improve your English skills, particularly listening and speaking, in ways that will not only help you communicate better, but also build your confidence. One of the things that I found to be extremely helpful is actively engaging in conversations. This doesn't mean you have to have long discussions right away, but even small interactions can improve your skills tremendously. Whether you're talking to someone at the grocery store, at work, or with a friend, these small moments can teach you a lot about how people use English in everyday situations. Let's say, for example, you're at a coffee shop ordering a drink. Instead of just saying, "Can I get a coffee?" try expanding it a little bit. You could say, "Hi, I'd like a medium latte, please. Could you also add some vanilla syrup to it? And I'll take it to go." By adding details to your request, you practice forming complete sentences, and you also get a chance to use more vocabulary. And even if you make a mistake, the key here is to practice. The more you practice in real situations, the more naturally the English language. Another great way to practice speaking is by joining online communities or language exchange programs. There are websites and apps where you can find language partners from around the world. This gives you the opportunity to practice with native speakers or other learners like yourself. It can be a little intimidating at first, but once you get started, you'll see how beneficial it is. For example, you could find a partner who speaks English fluently and set up a weekly conversation session. You can talk about topics that interest both of you, such as hobbies, travel, or food. And as you listen to them speak, you can also pick up on their accent, tone, and the way they use certain phrases or slang. Let me share a story about how this worked for me. I remember when I first started practicing with a language exchange partner named Sarah. She was from the United States, and we would talk for about 30 minutes every week. At first, I was so nervous to speak because I didn't feel like I knew enough words. But Sarah was so patient with me, and over time, I began to feel more comfortable. We talked about everything, from our favorite foods to our favorite vacations. What was interesting was that the more we spoke, the more I noticed I could understand her better. I didn't have to stop and think about every word. It felt natural. And over time, I found myself speaking without second-guessing my grammar. See, it's okay if you don't know every word in the language. What matters is how you express yourself and how willing you are to communicate. The more you engage with people, the more you will get used to thinking in English, even if you make mistakes. I've heard from many people who were afraid of making mistakes in conversations, but they soon realize that mistakes are a normal part of the learning process. It's through these mistakes that we actually improve. Now, let's talk about how you can get better at listening. A lot of people believe that listening is just about hearing the words someone is saying, but it's much more than that. Listening also means understanding the tone, the emotion behind the words, and the cultural context. A good way to improve your listening skills is by watching videos or listening to podcasts on topics you enjoy. For instance, let's say you like cooking. You could search for cooking podcasts or watch cooking shows on YouTube in English. Not only will you learn cooking vocabulary, but you'll also get to hear how people speak in informal, everyday situations. In my own learning journey, I started listening to podcasts that were focused on food and cooking. It wasn't only fun, but it also improved my listening comprehension because I was learning both the vocabulary and the cultural context around food. Another activity I highly recommend is listening to audiobooks. Audiobooks are great because you can listen to stories that are well-paced, and they usually come with a higher level of vocabulary. When I first started listening to audiobooks in English, I picked simple ones that were meant for learners, but over time, I started listening to novels and more challenging books. Even if I didn't understand everything, I was able to follow the story because I was familiar with the words, phrases, and sentence structures. One of the best techniques for improving your listening and comprehension is something called active listening. Active listening means paying close attention to what the speaker is saying, trying to understand not just the words, but also the meaning behind them. It's easy to let your mind wander when you're listening to something in English, but if you want to really improve, you need to focus. You can practice active listening by listening to podcasts or watching videos, and then summarizing what you've heard. For example, after listening to a short English podcast episode, take a moment to summarize the main ideas in your own words. This helps you process the information and identify areas you may not have fully understood. Once you've summarized the episode, you can go back and listen again, paying close attention to the parts that you missed or didn't understand the first time. Additionally, something that really helped me was learning how to recognize connected speech. In English, native speakers often don't say each word clearly and separately. Words are connected together, which can make them hard to understand at first. For example, the phrase, "What are you going to do?" might sound like, "What are you gonna do?" when spoken by a native speaker. The key here is to listen to natural conversations and get used to how words blend together. When I first encountered this in my learning journey, it was a challenge to understand native speakers, but over time, I started to notice patterns and was able to identify when words were connected. This made listening to podcasts and watching videos much easier. It felt like I was finally understanding what people were really saying, rather than just hearing a jumble of words. It's also essential to practice listening to different accents. English is spoken all around the world, and there are many different accents and dialects. If you only listen to one type of accent, you might struggle to understand others. So try to expose yourself to as many different accents as you can. For example, listen to podcasts from the UK, Australia, or even countries like South Africa and India. Each of these countries has its own version of English, and by listening to different accents, you'll train your ear to recognize various pronunciations, rhythms, and speech patterns. Here's an interesting exercise I tried to help me with this. I watched a short video where someone was speaking in a strong accent. At first, I didn't understand everything, but I rewound the video and listened to the same part multiple times. After a few attempts, I was able to catch more words, and eventually, I understood the entire conversation. This exercise taught me the importance of repetition and patience. It also made me more confident when listening to different accents. Now, let's focus on how you can improve your reading skills. Reading is an excellent way to expand your vocabulary and comprehension. When I was learning English, I made it a habit to read a little bit every day. I started with simple stories, then moved on to news articles, and eventually I read books. Reading books might sound intimidating, but it's a great way to see how words are used in context and to get a deeper understanding of grammar. I suggest starting with books that are written specifically for learners. They usually come with helpful vocabulary lists and simple sentence structures. You can also try reading things that interest you, like books on your hobbies or topics you enjoy. This will make reading much more enjoyable and help you stay motivated. To continue. When reading in English, don't be afraid to look up words you don't know. I used to carry a small dictionary with me when I was first learning, or you can use apps on your phone to look up unfamiliar words. Once you learn the meaning, try using that word in a sentence. The more you practice using new vocabulary, the more you'll remember it in the future. Another great technique is to read out loud. This can improve both your reading and speaking skills. When you read aloud, you get the chance to practice pronunciation, intonation, and fluency. Plus, it helps your brain remember the words more effectively. As you continue to practice speaking, listening, and reading, don't forget to keep track of your progress. It's easy to feel discouraged when learning a new language. But if you look back at how much you've improved, it will give you a huge confidence boost. Celebrate your successes, even the small ones, and remember that every bit of progress counts. Let's continue on our journey of improving your English skills, focusing now on creating more meaningful interactions and using language in practical ways that you will find useful in everyday life. I know that it can be tough at times, but trust me, the more you push yourself to practice, the more natural speaking, listening, and even writing in English will feel. One great way to start using English more naturally is by talking about your personal experiences. Why not start with your own life story or something interesting that happened to you recently? For example, if you went on a trip or visited a new place, you can practice describing it in English. Imagine telling a friend or your spouse about your day, explaining the events in detail. You'll have to think of words to describe what happened, what you saw, and how you felt. By doing this, you're practicing how to form sentences naturally, while also practicing your vocabulary. So, let's say you went hiking with your family last weekend. Here's how you might explain it in English. Last Saturday, my husband and I decided to go for a hike in the nearby mountains. We've been planning this trip for a while, but it was the first time we actually had the time to go. The weather was perfect, sunny but not too hot, so we packed some snacks and water. We started the hike in the morning, and it took us about 3 hours to reach the top. Along the way, we saw some amazing views. There were so many trees, and the sound of birds chirping was so peaceful. At the top, we stopped to take a rest and enjoyed the view. The whole experience was really relaxing and fun. When you talk like this, not only are you practicing speaking, but you're also working on listening comprehension. If you talk to a friend or even a language partner about this experience, you'll need to listen carefully to their responses as well. This kind of back-and-forth conversation is a great way to improve both your listening and speaking skills. It's also very effective because you're engaging with the language in a real, meaningful way. Now let's take a closer look at something else that can really improve your English: keeping a journal. Writing regularly in English is a fantastic way to improve both your vocabulary and grammar. You don't have to write long essays. Start with short sentences and simple entries, then gradually increase the length and complexity of your writing. If you want to take it a step further, try writing about things that happened during your day, like the example I gave earlier with the hiking trip. Over time, you'll notice that your sentences become more natural and fluid. You'll start using new words you've learned, and your ability to express yourself will improve. I remember when I first started writing in English, my sentences were very simple. But as I kept practicing, I began to feel more confident. Writing about my daily life in English allowed me to experiment with different sentence structures and learn how to express myself more clearly. This is a great practice for both intermediate and advanced learners alike. If you enjoy writing, why not take it one step further and try creating short stories or writing your own blog? Blogging can be a fun way to practice writing in English while also expressing your thoughts and ideas to an audience. You don't need to aim for perfection. Just focus on getting your ideas down and improving over time. For example, if you love traveling, you could start a blog about your experiences visiting different places. You'd be able to use English while sharing your experiences, and you'd improve your skills every time you write a new post. It's a win-win. In addition to speaking and writing, let's talk about how listening to different types of English can be a big help. One way to do this is by exploring news sources in English. Watching or reading news from English-speaking countries is a good way to improve your language skills. It's also a good idea because it helps you stay updated on global events, which is important for general knowledge. But here's a tip. Try not to focus too much on the speed of the news anchor's speech or the difficulty of the vocabulary in the beginning. Start with easier news stories or podcasts. and then gradually work your way up to more advanced content. For example, there are many beginner-level news podcasts available where they speak slowly and clearly. By listening to these regularly, you can improve your listening skills while staying informed. Also, you can focus on specific areas that interest you. If you like technology, there are plenty of English podcasts or YouTube channels where people talk about the latest gadgets, inventions, or tech news. By focusing on something that you're passionate about, learning English will become less of a chore and more enjoyable. In my case, I remember starting with simple podcasts about general news. At first, I didn't understand everything, but over time, I became more comfortable with the rhythm of the language. I also noticed that my vocabulary grew because I was hearing new words related to different subjects. After a few months, I was able to understand much more of what was being said, and I could even follow along with discussions about topics like politics or economics. Another great tool for improving your listening is watching English language, TED Talks. TED Talks cover a wide variety of topics, so you can choose subjects that you're interested in. The speakers usually talk slowly and clearly, making it easy to follow along. What's great about TED Talks is that you get to hear different accents and styles of speaking. You can also see how people express ideas in different ways. As you watch these talks, pay attention to how the speaker uses different sentence structures and vocabulary. You might pick up on phrases that you can use in your own conversation. Let's continue diving into more ways you can strengthen your English skills, making it feel like second nature when you speak, listen, or write. By now, you might already be feeling more confident in your ability to improve, but the real key to fluency is constant practice, dedication, and using every opportunity to immerse yourself in English. Every small step adds up, so let's explore even more methods and examples that will help you in this journey. We talked about using personal stories to improve your speaking and writing, and now let's think about expanding your vocabulary. A wide vocabulary helps you express yourself more clearly and makes conversations feel more natural. You don't need to memorize long lists of words or study grammar rules in isolation. Instead, the best way to build your vocabulary is by learning words in context. For example, when you hear a new word in a conversation or read it in a book, pay attention to how it's used. Think about how it fits into the sentence. What kind of situation would you use this word in? Try to use the word in your own sentences to reinforce it in your mind. Let me share a quick story. A few months ago, I was reading a book in English and I came across the word serene. I had never heard it before, but based on the context, I could tell that it described something calm and peaceful. So I made a note of it and tried using it in a sentence the next day. I said to a friend, "This park is so serene. It's the perfect place to relax." Over time, I found myself using serene more naturally in conversations. By learning words in context, you'll remember them better, and you'll be able to use them appropriately when speaking or writing. Now, let's shift our focus a little and talk about using English in real-life situations, not just in theory. One thing I recommend is to practice English in the tasks you already do every day. Whether it's cooking, doing housework, or running errands, try describing what you're doing in English as you do it. For example, when you're making dinner, you might say to yourself, "I'm chopping onions. Now I'm putting them in the pan. I'll let them cook for 5 minutes before adding the tomatoes." This technique is super helpful because it connects language with action. You'll start thinking in English even when you're not speaking to anyone, and this practice will make you feel more comfortable when you're in real conversations. Sometimes, it can be hard to stay motivated, especially when things don't seem to be improving as quickly as you'd like. But I promise, even small efforts count. Every time you try speaking in English, writing a new sentence, or listening to a podcast, you're improving. You might not notice it immediately, but over time, you'll realize how much progress you've made. Think about it this way. Learning. A language is like building a house. At first, you lay the foundation with basic words and simple sentences. As you practice, you add more bricks, gradually making the house stronger and taller. One day you'll look back and be amazed by how far you've come. A great way to keep track of your progress is to set small, achievable goals. This can help you stay focused and motivated. For example, you could set a goal to learn 5 new words each week, or aim to have 1 short conversation in English every day. You could also challenge yourself to write a journal entry every night. The key is to make your goals specific and realistic. By doing this, you'll have a sense of accomplishment every time you achieve one of your goals, which will encourage you to keep practicing. Another fantastic way to immerse yourself in English is by interacting with people from different parts of the world. One of the advantages of learning English is that it's spoken all over the globe, and you can use it to connect with people from many different countries and cultures. Have you ever thought about joining an online language exchange community? There are platforms where you can find people who want to practice their English and are also looking for someone to practice another language with. You can arrange video calls or text chats with language partners, and in doing so, you'll gain real-world experience in conversational English. Plus, you'll have the chance to learn about different cultures, which can be an exciting and enriching experience. I remember my first experience with a language exchange partner. I connected with a woman from Spain who was learning English, and we talked every week. At first, I felt nervous because I wasn't sure if I would understand her completely or if I would make too many mistakes. But as we kept talking, I became more comfortable. She was very patient, and we both helped each other out. I learned a lot about her culture, and she taught me a lot of useful phrases and expressions in English. Language exchanges are wonderful because you get to practice speaking in a relaxed setting, and it's a great way to improve your fluency. Additionally, let's talk about listening to English in different accents. English is spoken in many different ways depending on the country or region. For example, British English, American English, Australian English, and even regional dialects within those countries all have unique accents and vocabulary. If you only listen to one accent, you might struggle to understand others when you hear them in real life. That's why it's important to expose yourself to a variety of accents. You can do this by listening to podcasts, watching videos, or listening to radio stations from different English-speaking countries. For instance, if you're used to hearing American English, try listening to some podcasts from the UK or Australia. You'll hear different pronunciations and different ways of expressing ideas. At first, it might be challenging, but over time, your ear will become more tuned to these different sounds. I remember when I first heard an Australian accent, I had a hard time understanding some of the words, but after listening to it more, I began to pick up the unique pronunciation and vocabulary used in that accent. Another great tool to improve listening is watching YouTube channels or videos that offer subtitles. By reading the subtitles while you listen, you can match the spoken words with the written text, helping you understand and remember new vocabulary. After watching a video, you can try to summarize what you learned in your own words. This activity will help you practice both listening and writing, making it a double boost for your language skills. In my own learning experience, using subtitles was a game changer. It allowed me to focus on pronunciation and sentence structure while also improving my writing ability. Let's not forget about the power of repetition. Repeating things you hear is a powerful tool for improving your pronunciation and comprehension. When you listen to a sentence or a word you don't understand, repeat it a few times. Try to imitate the way the speaker says it, paying attention to the rhythm and intonation. This practice will not only improve your pronunciation, but also help you become more familiar with the natural flow of the language. Sometimes it's easy to feel discouraged if you don't see fast progress, but I assure you, every time you practice, you are building the skills you need. Language learning is a long-term commitment, and small, consistent efforts will pay off over time. If you keep practicing, soon enough, you'll look back and be amazed at how much you've improved. Whether you're talking to someone in English, writing a blog, or listening to a podcast, each of these activities will help you on your path to fluency. All right, let's dive even deeper into how you can improve your English skills by using real-life scenarios and a bit of creative thinking. English is all around us, and the more we use it in everyday situations, the better we get at it. The best part? You don't need to always be studying to improve. By simply engaging with English naturally, you'll see real progress. Now, we talked about how incorporating English into your daily life is essential. Whether you're cooking, cleaning, or running errands, describing what you're doing out loud in English is an easy and effective method. But let's take this idea further. What if you began keeping an English journal? It doesn't need to be anything fancy or too long, just a short note about your day. Writing about your experiences, thoughts, or what you're planning to do in English helps you practice both vocabulary and sentence structure. Over time, you'll notice your writing becoming more fluid and confident. For example, after a long day of work, I'll write about my experiences in my journal. It might start like this. Today, I had a busy day at work. I had a meeting with my boss and discussed the progress of our project. After work, I went to the grocery store and bought ingredients to make dinner. I decided to cook a pasta dish tonight. As simple as this is, it's an excellent way to get comfortable writing in English. And don't worry if you make mistakes. The goal is to practice and learn from them. As you continue writing, you'll naturally start using more complex sentences and structures. Another great exercise is to describe the things around you in English. Try to do it in a way that challenges your vocabulary. For example, if you're sitting in your living room, describe it in detail. You could say, I'm sitting on the sofa, and it's a cozy space. The room is bright, with light streaming in through the window. There's a bookshelf on the left side, filled with novels and photo frames. The walls are painted in a soft blue color, and I love how calm it makes me feel. Describing things in detail helps you to practice using descriptive language, which makes your speaking and writing sound more natural and engaging. Now let's explore a great way to improve your speaking skills, practicing with a conversation partner. This is probably one of the most valuable ways to improve your fluency. Find someone who also wants to practice English, or join an online language exchange group. You can practice speaking with people from different countries, which exposes you to various accents, slang, and ways of expressing ideas. For example, you might meet someone from the United States and have a conversation about your daily life. Then you could talk to someone from the UK about the same topic. This will give you insight into different ways of using English and help you understand regional differences. When I started speaking more regularly with different people, I quickly learned that there's no one way to speak English. It's more about communication and understanding each other, no matter what the accent or phrasing might be. For instance, I had a conversation with a friend from Australia, and at first I was a bit confused by some of the slang words they used. But once I asked and got the explanation, I was able to use them in my own conversations. This is the beauty of language. It's ever-changing and adaptable to the people using it. You might also want to try listening to podcasts or watching videos with native English speakers. Not just any video, though. Aim for content where the speakers are discussing topics that interest you. Whether it's a topic about science, travel, or personal development, hearing people speak about things they are passionate about will help you pick up new vocabulary and improve your listening skills. As you listen, try to focus on the way the speakers use phrases, pauses, and intonation. Then, try to mimic the sentences or expressions in your own conversations. One of my favorite things to do when improving my listening is to listen to podcasts that discuss daily life topics. For example, a podcast I listened to recently had an episode where the host talked about their morning routines. It was fascinating to hear how different people start their days. One person said, "I wake up at 6 a.m., drink some water, and go for a 20-minute jog." Another person said, "I start my day slowly by reading a book for about 30 minutes before I even get out of bed." Listening to these everyday routines gave me ideas about how to structure my own morning, but also exposed me to different ways of using English when talking about routines. I also practiced repeating sentences like, "I drink a cup of coffee before I leave the house," and "My morning routine is simple but important." Another important skill to work on is your pronunciation. This is a huge part of sounding confident when speaking. While it might seem difficult at first, there are simple exercises you can do to improve. One thing I like to do is practice tongue twisters. They're fun and challenging. For example, "She sells seashells by the seashore." At first, it might be hard to say quickly, but over time, it will help you improve your pronunciation and fluency. I've found that when I practice these kinds of phrases regularly, I can speak more clearly in conversations, and I feel more confident when I talk. Now, we've already discussed listening, writing, and speaking practices in daily life. But what about reading? Many learners often underestimate the power of reading in improving their language skills. Reading is an excellent way to familiarize yourself with sentence structure, vocabulary, and even cultural references. The beauty of reading is that it gives you time to think and understand the material before responding, unlike speaking, where you need to react almost instantly. Reading aloud is one of the best techniques to practice, especially if you're looking to work on pronunciation. This method can also be paired with shadowing. For instance, when reading a short article or a story, pause after each sentence, repeat it aloud, and make sure you're pronouncing the words correctly. Over time, you'll start noticing that your confidence grows and your pronunciation improves. Even more importantly, your understanding of English grammar will naturally improve because you're actively engaging with the language in different contexts. For example, the next time you read a short story or news article, try reading it aloud and pay attention to the sentence structure. You might come across sentences like, "Despite the rain, Sarah decided to go for a run." Now, instead of just reading the words, say them out loud. When you do this, focus on the punctuation, the pauses, and the intonation. This will help you understand how the sentence flows in a natural way and will make it easier to replicate when you speak. As we move forward, let's talk about a method that is becoming very popular among language learners: language immersion. Immersion doesn't necessarily mean traveling to an English-speaking country, but rather surrounding yourself with the language as much as possible in your daily life. This can be done by changing the language settings on your phone, watching English news, reading books in English, and even following social media accounts that post content in English. Immersion helps you get used to hearing and seeing English consistently, which helps you develop a more natural understanding of the language. For example, one of the first things I did to improve my listening skills was set my phone and social media accounts to English. This way, I was surrounded by English 24/7. I would read the posts, see comments, and even try to reply in English. It didn't matter if I made mistakes. It was the practice that counted. It felt a little strange at first, but eventually it became second nature, and I started recognizing patterns in language use, like how people express their feelings or talk about events in their lives. This immersion approach allowed me to pick up vocabulary that I wouldn't have otherwise encountered in my textbooks. In fact, immersion is so powerful because it creates a learning environment where you're constantly exposed to new words and phrases. Let's say you're scrolling through Instagram and come across a post that says, "My weekend getaway was so refreshing. I needed a break from the usual hustle and bustle of city life. Reading that in English helps you see how native speakers use expressions in casual conversations. The word hustle and bustle, for example, is a common way to describe a busy, noisy environment. If you came across this phrase in a textbook, it might seem more difficult to understand, but when you see it in a real-life context, it becomes easier to grasp. Beyond the basics of immersion, let's dive deeper into something that many learners often overlook: cultural context. English is not just about grammar and vocabulary, it's also about understanding how the language is used in different cultures. Every language reflects the values, history, and lifestyle of its speakers. For instance, in English-speaking cultures, it's very common to start conversations with small talk, like asking about the weather or someone's plans for the weekend. These simple phrases might seem trivial, but they play a huge role in building relationships and understanding social norms. Let's say you're having a conversation with a friend in English. You might start by saying, "Hi, how was your weekend?" If your friend replies, "It was great. I went hiking in the mountains," that's a small interaction, but it's a way to connect. If you were having this conversation in a different language or culture, the small talk might be different. In some cultures, it's not as common to discuss personal activities right away, but in English-speaking cultures, these topics help. This brings me to another important point: humor. English, like any language, has its own sense of humor, and understanding it can help you connect with others on a deeper level. Humor in English can be tricky to understand at first because it often relies on idioms, wordplay, and cultural references. For example, have you ever heard someone say, "I'm feeling a bit under the weather"? This is an idiom that means they are feeling sick. If you take it literally, it might sound like they're sick because they've been out in bad weather, but that's not the case. Learning these types of expressions and understanding their cultural significance can be fun and helpful. One way to do this is by listening to English comedy podcasts or watching stand-up comedy performances. These comedians often use humor that is based on everyday life, which will help you learn how to use jokes and puns in your conversations. Plus, you'll learn how to understand humor in English, which can be a great way to break the ice and bond with others. I also want to talk a bit about practicing with technology. Many people find it easier to learn languages using apps, games, or even virtual assistants like Siri or Google Assistant. These tools can help you practice speaking and improve your listening skills. For example, I remember using a language app where you could practice English phrases and listen to native speakers. It was interactive, which made it feel like I was having a conversation with someone, even if I was practicing alone. You can also try using voice-to-text features on your phone or computer. This will help you practice pronunciation and see how well your spoken English matches up with the text. If the text doesn't match, that's a sign that you need to work on your pronunciation, which is a perfect opportunity for improvement. The key is to keep challenging yourself in new ways. And lastly, let's not forget the power of feedback. When you're practicing English, whether it's through speaking or writing, getting feedback from others is incredibly important. This could be from a teacher, a friend, or even a language partner. They can point out areas where you need improvement or suggest new ways to express yourself more naturally. In my experience, getting feedback is one of the most effective ways to learn. It's like having a guide to help you along the way. For instance, when I was learning to write in English, I asked a native speaker to read some of my writing. They gave me suggestions like, "You could say it this way to make it sound more natural," or "Try to avoid using this word here. It doesn't fit the context." At first, it was a bit tough to hear criticism, but over time, I realized that it was helping me become a better writer. Now, I use the same method when I talk to my students, encouraging them to keep practicing and to ask for feedback regularly. With all these tips, exercises, and examples, you'll begin to see your English skills grow. Whether it's writing, speaking, listening, or reading, practice is key. And remember, mistakes are just part of the learning process. The more you engage with English, the better you'll get at it. One of the most effective ways to practice English is through conversations. In real-life situations, you're often forced to think on your feet, respond quickly, and adjust your language based on who you're speaking to. While it's great to practice grammar and vocabulary on your own, real conversations are where you'll see the biggest improvements. But I know that for many people, speaking in English can feel a little intimidating at first. That's completely normal, and it's something I experienced when I was learning too. A great way to start is by finding someone to practice with. This could be a friend, a classmate, or even someone you meet online. When I first started practicing English, I connected with a language partner through a language exchange website. My partner was a native English speaker who wanted to learn my native language, and we'd meet twice a week to practice speaking in English. We'd have simple conversations at first, like talking about the weather or our daily routines, but as we got more comfortable, we started discussing more complex topics, like our goals or travel plans. This was such a valuable experience because I got to practice in a real-world context, making mistakes along the way and learning from them. You don't need to worry about making mistakes during these conversations, though. Mistakes are natural and they happen to everyone, even native speakers. Think about it. When you hear someone speaking in English, do you immediately judge them for their mistakes? No. You're listening to the message and understanding their intent, not focusing on the small errors. The same goes for you. If you make a mistake, don't let it hold you back. Just keep speaking and learn from the experience. You can also try language meetups in your area, or even virtual meetups, which can be found through apps or social media. Being in a group of people who are all working on their English skills is a great way to build confidence. Plus, it's a chance to hear different accents and expressions, which can help you improve your listening comprehension. The more you're exposed to different ways of speaking, the easier it will be to understand and communicate with people from different English-speaking backgrounds. Another great way to improve your speaking skills is by mimicking or shadowing native speakers. This technique involves repeating sentences exactly as you hear them, paying attention to pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation. You can do this with videos, podcasts, or even TV shows. Don't worry about understanding every word. The goal is to imitate the way the words are spoken, so you can practice sounding more natural. For instance, if you're watching a short video of someone having a conversation, pause the video after a sentence, repeat it out loud, and try to match their tone and rhythm. Over time, you'll start sounding more like a native speaker. 2. Make the most out of this technique. Try using short clips or simple dialogues that are relevant to your life. For example, if you're planning a trip, find a video about travel tips or airport procedures in English. Listen carefully, then repeat what you hear. This will help you practice both vocabulary and pronunciation in a real-life context. Another tip for improving your speaking skills is to focus on fluency rather than perfection. A lot of learners worry too much about speaking perfectly, but the key to becoming fluent is speaking without stopping to correct yourself every time you make a small mistake. Instead, focus on keeping the conversation going, even if you're not sure about a word or phrase. It's much more important to keep talking than to stop every few seconds to fix something. If you make a mistake, just move on, and chances are, the person you're speaking to won't even notice. One of the ways I improved my fluency was by setting a timer for myself and challenging myself to talk about a topic for 5 minutes without stopping. I would record myself speaking, and afterward I'd listen to the recording and see how well I did. It helped me realize that even if I made mistakes, I was still able to communicate my message clearly. As a bonus, recording yourself can help. You identify areas where you need improvement, such as pronunciation or using more natural phrases. Listening practice is another key area where you can improve. The more you expose yourself to different types of English, the easier it will be to understand a variety of accents and speaking styles. For instance, listening to a podcast in English is an excellent way to get used to the natural flow of conversation. If you're listening to an interview or a discussion, pay attention to how the speakers connect their thoughts, use transitions, and express ideas clearly. At first, you may not understand everything, but over time, you'll start to pick up on important keywords and phrases. When I was learning English, I spent a lot of time listening to podcasts and TED Talks. The great thing about podcasts is that they often cover everyday topics, which means you can learn English as it's used in the real world. One podcast I loved listening to was a daily news show, which gave me exposure to both formal and informal language. I would listen to the episode in the morning and try to write down any words or phrases I didn't know. Then I'd look them up and make sure I understood them before trying to use them in my own conversations. This not only improved my vocabulary, but also helped me learn how to express myself in a variety of situations. Thank you for your patience. Let's continue to dive into even more strategies that can help you master English and feel confident using it in your everyday life. It's a journey, and the more steps you take, the better you'll become at expressing yourself and understanding others. One of the best things you can do to improve your speaking skills is to immerse yourself in English as much as possible. This doesn't mean you have to live in an English-speaking country, though that can certainly help. What it does mean is that you need to find ways to surround yourself with English, even when you're not actively studying. For example, let's say you enjoy cooking. Why not look up recipes in English? You'll find that many recipes online have videos and step-by-step instructions in English. Watching cooking tutorials can help you not only learn cooking vocabulary, but also pick up common phrases and expressions used in everyday speech. I started doing this when I was learning English, and it worked wonders for me. It felt natural because I was already interested in cooking, and it was an enjoyable way to practice listening and learning new words. Similarly, if you're interested in any hobbies, whether it's gardening, photography, or sports, you can find content related to that in English. You can watch tutorials, read articles, or even follow Instagram accounts or YouTube channels that focus on your hobbies in English. This way, you can improve your vocabulary while doing something you love. Plus, it keeps your learning fresh and exciting, which helps with motivation. While consuming English content related to your hobbies is one way to immerse yourself, you can also practice your English listening skills by listening to podcasts, news reports, or radio shows. The beauty of podcasts is that they cover so many different topics. Some podcasts talk about business, others focus on technology, and some cover history, culture, or science. There's something for everyone, no matter what interests you. I remember when I started listening to podcasts during my commute. It was a small change, but it made a big difference. I would listen to a podcast while driving to work or running errands, and before I knew it, I was understanding more of what the hosts were saying. I was learning new expressions, and my listening comprehension was improving every day. And the best part? It didn't feel like studying. It felt like entertainment. You can also use podcasts to work on your writing skills. One fun way to practice writing in English is by writing down your thoughts or opinions about an episode you just listened to. After listening to a podcast, take a few minutes to write a short summary of what you learned. Or, if you have strong opinions about the topic, write them down and explain why you agree or disagree with the ideas presented in the podcast. This helps you practice your writing and allows you to use the new vocabulary you learned while listening. It's important to mention that repetition plays a huge role in improving your English skills. You may not understand everything the first time you listen to a podcast or watch a video, but that's okay. Go ahead and listen again. The more times you hear a particular sentence or phrase, the more familiar it will become. This helps with your pronunciation and fluency too. It's just like practicing a musical instrument. Repetition is key to mastery. Another great technique is shadowing, which I mentioned earlier. Shadowing is when you listen to someone speaking in English and then repeat exactly what they say, trying to match their speed, tone, and pronunciation. This is a very effective exercise for improving both speaking and listening. You can shadow podcasts, YouTube videos, or even audiobooks. By mimicking the speaker, you will improve your rhythm and sound more natural when you speak English. When you're practicing speaking, don't worry too much about being perfect. I know for many learners, it's tempting to focus on getting every word exactly right. But remember, communication is about conveying your ideas and being understood, not about perfection. You can use hand gestures or body language to help explain yourself if you're struggling to find the right word. This is something I did when I was learning English. I found that when I couldn't remember a word, I would try to describe it using simpler words or gestures. It worked because the other person still understood me and I didn't have to stop the conversation. Additionally, if you're practicing speaking English with a language partner or a tutor, ask them to correct you, but only after you've finished speaking. This will help you feel more confident because you won't be interrupted mid-sentence. You can ask them to point out your mistakes afterward, so you can focus on speaking without worrying about every little mistake. Over time, you'll become more comfortable and fluent in expressing yourself.